Let's be honest. When you think about your skeleton, you probably picture something dry and static, right? Like a prop in a science classroom. But that idea couldn't be more wrong. Your bones are actually a living, incredibly dynamic organ system, constantly at work, breaking down and rebuilding themselves. So today, we're going to take a visual walkthrough and see how this amazing system really works from the inside out.
So, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the big picture, what bone is all about. Then, we'll zoom way in to meet the microscopic construction crew doing all the heavy lifting. After that, we'll check out the master switch that controls them, see how it all fits into the remodeling cycle, and finally, we'll see how a bone puts itself back together after a fracture.
All right, let's dive right in. Section 1, Bone as a Living Framework. Before we get into all the tiny details, we really have to get our heads around what our bones are actually doing for us. Because, trust me, it is so much more than just being a scaffold.
We all recognize this, right? The basic structure that holds our bodies up. But what an image like this just can't show you is the constant, buzzing activity that's happening inside every single one of these bones, 24/7. And that is where the real story is. I mean, our bones are a true multifunctional powerhouse. Of course, there are support structure and our internal armor, protecting our brain and our heart. And yeah, they're the anchor points for our muscles that let us move. But they're also a mineral bank, storing and releasing critical things like calcium. And maybe most amazingly, the marrow inside is a factory, pumping out all of our blood and immune cells. Okay, so now let's meet the workers. This is the microscopic, cellular construction crew that is constantly on the job, keeping this whole system strong and running smoothly.
First up, we've got the osteoblasts. Just think of them as the builders. They show up at a work site and start laying down this soft protein matrix called osteoid. It's kind of like the rebar and wet concrete. Then they kick off the process of hardening it all with minerals to form new bone.
And you can see them right here, caught in the act. That neat little line of pinkish-red cells? Yep, those are the osteoblasts, all lined up and methodically laying down new bone matrix, which you can see here in blue. It's just a perfect snapshot of construction in progress.
Now, you can't have construction without some demolition. So meet the osteoclasts. These are the big guys, and their job is to dissolve and break down old or damaged bone. This isn't just about cleaning up, though. This process, called resorption, is absolutely essential for making repairs and for releasing minerals like calcium back into the blood when your body needs it.
And here they are, doing what they do best. You can literally see the little scalloped pits they've carved out on the bone's surface. These are called resorption bays, and they are the telltale sign that the demolition crew has been at work.
Okay, so if we have builders and demolishers, who's in charge? That would be the osteocytes. Think of them as the site managers. And what's wild is that they're actually former osteoblasts that built bone around themselves and got trapped. From their little command posts, they act like the bone's sensory system, feeling for stress and strain, and then signaling the other cells, telling them where they need to build up or break down.
This image is just incredible. You're looking at an osteocyte, right in its little control room, called a lacuna. And see those tiny little tendrils reaching out? Those aren't just for show. They stretch through tiny channels in the bone, creating this massive communication network, almost like the bone's internet, to coordinate everything.
So we've got the whole crew, the builders, the demolishers, and the site managers. But what's the master control? What keeps everything in balance? Well, it all comes down to a really elegant signaling system that acts like a master switch for the whole operation.
The whole system really hinges on this delicate balance between two molecules. On one side, you have rancol. Think of it as the accelerator, or the green light for the demolition crew. It tells osteoclasts, go, go, go. But on the other side, you have OPG, which is the brake. OPG literally gets in the way and blocks rancol from doing its job. So the ratio between this accelerator and this brake is what determines if you're building bone or losing it. This balance is everything.
Okay, so we've met the crew and we understand the master switch. How does this all play out day to day? Well, it all comes together in this continuous process called bone remodeling. And we're not just talking about tiny repairs here. This cycle is so active that you essentially get a whole new skeleton about every 10 years.
And here's a look at that whole cycle in motion. It really is like a beautifully coordinated dance. See how it flows? The osteoclasts, the demolition crew, move along, scooping out the old bone. And then, right on their heels, the osteoblasts follow, coming in to fill that exact same space with fresh,
new bone.
It all happens in 3 main phases. First, activation. Some kind of signal, maybe from an osteocyte feeling some stress from your workout, calls the demolition crew to the site. Then comes resorption, where for a few weeks the osteoclasts dissolve a tiny piece of old bone. And finally, formation. The builders move in, and over the next 4 to 6 months, they completely refilled that little cavity. And this exact process is happening in millions of spots all over your skeleton right now.
So that's the day-to-day maintenance. But what happens when there's a major crisis, like a broken bone? Well, the body just kicks this exact same system into overdrive, using the same cells and the same principles, but in a much faster, more dramatic healing process.
Let's just walk through it. First, the break causes bleeding, which forms a big clot called a hematoma. This provides the initial scaffolding for repair. Next, other cells move in and create a soft cartilage-like patch, a procallus. Then our friends the osteoblasts get to work, turning that soft patch into a hard, bony callus to stabilize the break. But it's not done yet. That temporary bone is then replaced with much stronger, more organized bone. And finally, in the remodeling phase, the demolition and construction crews work together to sculpt the bone back to its original shape, often making it even stronger than it was before the break.
So if you take away just one thing from all of this, it should be this idea right here. Our skeleton is not a static object. It is a living, breathing system, always in a state of controlled deconstruction and reconstruction, constantly adapting to keep us strong and healthy. And understanding this normal, elegant physiology is so important because it immediately brings up the next critical question. What happens when this perfect balance between the builders and the demolishers gets thrown off? Whether by age, a disease like osteoporosis, or even some medications. That's when things go wrong, and that's exactly where pathology begins.